Hi everyone, this is James from Joe Repros, and this will be part 3 of our series on mold making and resin casting. We will be focusing on G.I. Joe, but the techniques featured in this series of videos can be applied to anything you want to reproduce. This episode we will be talking about pressure pots, their uses, and how to set one up. Before we begin, we must warn you that these can be incredibly dangerous, and if you skimp on these or over-pressurize, you will have a literal bomb on your hands. I have seen these explode, and it was like a landmine going off. So be careful and never exceed the safe PSI shown on the unit. Now that's out of the way, let's go through the physical specs, what to look for, and what you need to safely convert one from a paint pot to save money. First up, we have the basic pot itself. When looking for a pot to convert, make sure to check all the internal and external welding. Dodgy welding can lead to explosions. Next up is the safety release valve. You may need to replace this when you buy it. They can be found at any hardware store because they are often set to go off at much lower than the pot's safe PSI, and you won't be able to reach optimal PSI for casting if you do not replace that. But some units also do come with ones correct for the PSI, so just check on the safety valve itself, because quite often I say what PSI it goes up to. You may also want to do what we have done and put some threading tape around here. It can help seal up air, stops the pressure from dropping around the threading. Next up we have the ball valves, as seen in our vacuum chamber video. You'll want them in this position when casting, so the air doesn't come out here, instead go straight down there and into the pot. You can usually buy the ball valves quite cheaply at hardware stores if they don't come with your pot, and just thread them on. Finally, we have the gauge, which is probably the most important part, so you can tell what PSI you're up to. Normally, this PSI maximum rating here, which is 80 on mine, will be the same as what your pot can handle. Always double check that, but never go past the maximum. That can lead to explosions. The issue is that you've got to get that as close as possible to have optimum casts, even with vacuum and pressuring. So it's quite a dangerous game, so always have your pressure and just casting set up as far away from other people as you can. Now let's talk about why you should have a pressure pot for your casting. When you pressurize resin, it does two things. First, it pushes the resin down through all the nooks and crannies in your molds to where it's supposed to be. And secondly, will compress the air bubbles to microscopic size. I will point out though that just pressurizing alone is not enough to stop bubbles. In fact, you will likely have more failures than successes just with a pot. It's a combination of both vacuuming the resin inside the mold and then putting the mold inside the pressure pot and pressurizing that will 9 out of 10 times give you a flawless, crisp cast that you'll just be so excited to share with all your friends. Without a pressure pot, however, you'll likely find almost no resin has entered your mold at all, and that will be quite disappointing. In fact, in episode 5, when we start going through mold making process and onwards and casting, in one of our later episodes, we'll do a cast that's just vacuum, a cast that's just pressure, a cast that uses none of it, and a cast that uses both pressure and vacuuming. So you can really see the difference the combination makes. Well, that's it for this episode. Stay tuned for our next episode when we go over air compressors and which one you should get for your pot. Take care and cast on.